Thank you, Jolani, for that update. Jolani will be back with us in the next hour, always making sure we get into the know of what's happening in the news right here on the African continent and beyond. We've got so many interesting conversations. Remember, you can stay in touch. +278 3288 That's our WhatsApp number. Save it on your phone and you can just be part of the action in studio as well. Talking about the action in studio, we are live on our streams. You can check the visuals in our studio on our YouTube page at Channel Africa 1 or our Facebook page simply titled Channel Africa. Today we're going to be speaking in this hour around World Read Aloud Day. I don't know, is reading aloud still relevant as an adult? Do you think it's something that we need to do? I read a lot, but I don't always read aloud.
Yeah, you're reading in your head, right?
I'm reading in my head, but you know, when I want to get a sentence right, and I'm trying to kind of get like the structure of a sentence in a paragraph. You know, sometimes you get that tricky book. That's like very wordy. Right? And you're like, okay, let me read this out loud so I can get an understanding of what this person is trying to say here. You know? So
essentially, I think because of that, I mean, that's a great example that you use there, because that means that something in your brain requires you to hear the sentence like you would in normal life, because we are audio, people, right? If you're not deaf, of course. And that rewires your brain to understand the sentence better. So perhaps there are benefits that we are overlooking.
All right, we're going to find that out from Lebohang Masango, who is an author, anthropologist and poet. That should be a good one. We ask, what do we lose when we stop reading aloud, and what can this small but powerful habit still bring people together in the world glued to screens? Hey, that's what's coming up right here on Channel Africa.
Benjamin Moshatama and
It's Fireboy DML. This is Dopamine. Reading out loud. When was the last time you did that? Let's find out after this.
the rhythm of Africa, the pulse of the continent. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective. Your life, your rhythm, your Africa. Channel Africa. Find it for free on Google Play and the Apple App Store.
Africa, Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel África. Adivinha só, a Channel África quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel África está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Palesa and Benjamin fuel your day with fresh African perspective on Channel Africa.
All right, let's get into this conversation that we're having right now. Today, we are acknowledging this important day. Maybe we might overlook its importance, but let's center it in this hour. World Read Aloud Day. Many of us probably think like reading aloud was something that is being disapproved the older we get. Maybe it's more suitable for the young children. We are busy stretching ourselves and scrolling on TikTok and YouTube instead of really sharing stories of what we read, or also the stories that we have inside of us, right? Because we know of also oral tradition that's also reading aloud from the African continent. Once a simple human act that connected families, friends, and communities, reading aloud now feels like a luxury, something we only do if we have time or the energy. Also, we just limit that to certain activities, maybe reading to our children. Lebohang Masango, author and anthropologist and poet, is going to help us answer this question. Why did we lose that art of reading aloud? Lebohang, welcome on the show.
Hi there, Benjamin. How are you today?
I'm good, man. And this is an interesting conversation because, look, you know, from an oral tradition as Africans, reading aloud is something that should have come naturally to us, because even the fact that our stories are within us, we tell them naturally. I'm not sure if we are still telling even those stories that have been handed from generation to generation. Or maybe it's because we've stuck to a new way of reading that we think everything needs to be silenced.
Those are some interesting provocations. And you're right, we are definitely people who come from oratory traditions, from storytelling traditions. And I really think those traditions are definitely still alive within us. I mean, all of us can tell a story about that uncle or auntie who is so hilarious at telling stories. So I think it's something we continue to maintain. But the disruption perhaps in preserving the folk tales, preserving the stories of our origins, as you mentioned, perhaps that disruption is coming along with screens, you know, and the more time that we're spending with screens and looking ahead towards the future with, you know, generative AI and all these innovations, perhaps we're forgetting to look into the past. So that certainly is an interesting provocation to begin with.
You know, I remember how incredible it was when I used to read my son bedtime stories, Lebohang. He enjoyed them. I enjoyed them as well. But what I enjoyed the most was the time we got to spend together, the laughter that we shared. Now he's really much older. He's 19 now. I mean, we talk here and there, but there isn't really the same sense of togetherness, I guess, a moment like that can be shared with family members that creates a bond, right? And that's something that we're missing when it comes to reading out loud, not maybe just by ourselves, but also in relation to our loved ones.
Absolutely. And you know, Palesa, reading out loud, especially parent and child sessions, those still continue to be so beneficial, even though children grow up to become independent readers. And even though they have that capability to go off into their own space and read by themselves, I really do encourage parents to continue to sit down with them. As you've mentioned, it creates bonds, it creates open channels of communication and conversation that I think are important to maintain between parents and children and guardians as they grow older, maintaining that bond, that ability to speak freely and openly, that ability to entrust you with their vulnerability and their emotions. And all of that, I think, can be connected to fostering a safe space for reading, a safe space to sit with a book and to cultivate curiosity. I think that in this world of screens, I would like to please encourage everyone, especially older people dealing with younger people, engage them and cultivate their curiosity. If you don't understand a word, be vulnerable enough to admit it, be open about it, and look for the word, understand its meaning, its history, be able to nurture an environment where you both can come with your curiosities and learn together.
We think reading out loud has a purpose in learning, particularly for children, right? So most of the time, the last time most of us read out loud was in primary school when we were still reading to, understanding to read, understanding to comprehend. And, the teacher said, you go and read in front of the class or you read in your group and you have to say it out loud. So we think perhaps that's the purpose for reading out loud. What purpose does it hold now that we're adults and independent readers?
I think that example you use is a great one, where you are called to the front of the class and asked to read. What that is meant to do is strengthen our confidence, to be able to speak in public, to be able to speak our minds, and to also be able to do the private work necessary to trust that the words we are sharing in public are the kinds of words that have credibility and will find popular agreement amongst people. And so these are the kinds of skills we foster when we continue to read out loud, when we continue to check in to ensure that we know how to pronounce words, we know what words mean, and if we don't know, we are curious enough to go out there and learn. That is a very important purpose. And what it also does, the more that we understand what words mean, the more that we increase our grasp of understanding stories and narratives, the more we're able to be critical, And it's important, I think, for a country, a state, to have citizens that are able to engage critically with information, to be able to, in this AI era, be able to distinguish between what is real and what is fiction. All of this is embedded in our ability to cultivate and nurture those safe spaces for children to sit down, read, and engage with the world. We as adults engage with the world on a higher level, level of curiosity and rationale. But the children, they start with that ability of understanding that red is a color and this is what it looks like as a word and this is what it looks like out in the world. It starts with those seeds and we must nurture them. It's so important.
You're saying something very powerful there. What happens is that over time, that process is diminished by growth and maturity and life experience and work and all sorts of things. And then we stop getting that great wealth of experience from reading out loud, right? That interruption, is it caused really by our busyness, or is it the fact that we just don't find value anymore in that activity of reading loud?
I am so afraid of, what this answer is and also the implications it could have, because we are living in an era of convenience where we are able to outsource so much of our mental functions to the technology around us. And in many ways, this saves us time, and we are very, very grateful and excited to be living in a time where these innovations are so accessible. So this is exciting and it's great, but at the same time, it is diminishing our own curiosity. It is diminishing our own diligence for getting out there and putting in the effort to find the answer, And for someone like myself, who's an academic and other academics around us, this is what our entire work is predicated upon, that ability to be curious, to try, to fail, to keep attempting over and over again. And am afraid that with the convenience of, outsourcing your thinking to this thing that is called artificial intelligence, that it just makes us a little bit lazier, And of course, some people will actually say there have been innovations over time that have replaced manual labor. You have the calculator that replaced perhaps working it out on your own. We have computers that replace calculators and so on. These innovations come here to make our lives easier. Absolutely. I'm still trying to think through it, but there is something about outsourcing the very act of thinking and imagination that scares me, I believe.
Oh, all right.
So I have nothing optimistic to say.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a break. Lebohang, stay on the line with us. We'll come back and speak about reading out loud. Can you even remember the last time you read out loud? Let us know at Channel Africa 1.
60 years of Channel Africa. Your trusted voice. Your African perspective. Into the future. Are you fluent in French, Chinyanja, Portuguese, and Kiswahili? Are you passionate about radio? And are you looking to work in South Africa? Do you have papers that qualify you to work in South Africa? In that case, we might have an opportunity for you to work for Channel Africa. Send us your CV and demo at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Remember, if you don't hear from us within 14 days, it means you have not made it or you have not been selected. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Step into the heart of the day on the move with Palesa and Benjamin.
We're speaking to author, anthropologist, and poet Lebohang Masango about reading out loud, what we've lost when we've stopped reading out loud, and how the small but powerful habit can still bring people together in a world glued to our screens. I'm thinking about, childhood and reading out loud, and how embarrassed we used to be to go stand in front of the class to read out loud, Lebohang. But over time, our confidence would build. But then once we knew how to read and read independently, we stopped reading out loud. And if you are still a reader, which there are very few of these days, those people hardly read out loud as well. But I'm thinking I'm going to sit in my room and try and read out loud. It feels like we also feel embarrassed with ourselves for some reason. Like we haven't heard our voices in, a closed space without interacting with someone else as often as we should as adults. Are we embarrassed of ourselves? Are we embarrassed to read out to ourselves?
That is so interesting. And I think this is why human beings are so fascinating, isn't it, Palesa? Because when it's time to sit in a room and essentially speak to myself, although I'm speaking to you, I can do that quite easily. When it's time to have a video call, or when it's time to make that vlog, as content creators, we're able to talk to ourselves in public even nowadays. But when it's time to read out loud, there's a bit of embarrassment. So I think that's what makes us so interesting as human beings. But I encourage us to keep pushing ourselves to just try to find those moments. It really does sharpen you. It really expands your mind. It adds to your vocabulary. I think it makes us all interesting people when we keep learning and keep absorbing things about the world. So yeah, as much as it can be a bit cringe, I think I would like to challenge us all to just try every now and then to just read out loud.
Lebohang, let's expand on that. On the benefits of reading out loud. You highlighted some of the great things that can actually happen there. What does it do to your world in terms of, I think it does so many things, right? Because I'm just processing the power of reading just as I speak to you, right? I was reading the Bible just yesterday, and I was kind of interpreting what the Bible is saying and writing notes and what, I was reading in there. And, sometimes I have to pray what the Bible is saying and try to ask God for the things that I'm reading that are very difficult to read in that book. And I'm thinking of just that whole concept of, the knowledge that you receive from reading that book, but also the fact that you can speak out some of the things that are in that book, but also what that does to your vocabulary, what does that to your spiritual life, to your social well-being. There's so many benefits, right?
Absolutely. And you really do begin to touch on those benefits. The ability to just be by yourself in a space and to just fill the room with just your own sounds, the sounds of your own words. Because if you are going to read silently to yourself, it does have benefit, but you're able to just really gloss over the words and not really have to kind of be deliberate in saying each word. It makes you spend time enunciating, pronouncing the words, and perhaps it also allows you to just take a moment to briefly imagine what the word means and to conjure the mental image that the author is asking of you by putting this assortment of words together. And so it is an act of imagining, connecting your voice to the word, understanding the rules of inflection as well. You know, all of these things are practiced so much better and make us so much better as conversationalists, as speakers, when we are able to take the time to keep practicing on a very regular basis. So the benefits certainly are immense. And even, you know, in relation to younger people as well, creating bonds, creating the ability to be critical, and also constantly being able to check on their empathy for the world as well, checking on your own empathy for the world, hearing these issues out loud. The benefits really are endless.
I'm thinking also about cognitive function for adults, because I remember reading research that because of, you know, social media and the tech age, we have shorter attention spans. All of us are getting shorter attention spans as the world evolves in AI. And that also means that we have removed quite a lot of brain function. And our senses are there to also, you know, navigate those different brain functions. And in a similar way where you're encouraged, if you are studying for an exam, to write and read because you're using more than one sense. Could this improve our cognitive function? I'm thinking also maybe in the future for things like dementia, which, you know, is on the rise even here on the African continent, using our brain in more dynamic ways to keep it active.
Certainly, you know, fellow colleagues in the world of biological research and so on have really done incredible work to look at the ways in which this hand-eye coordination, the simple act of writing and reading and just spending time on activities that improve literacy, reading out loud, all of these things, the ability to remember, the ability to store our definitions of words and understand and remember how rules are meant to be enacted grammatically, all of these things are working together, all of the various parts of our brain firing together to ensure that all of this function is happening for the sake of being able to read and write and speak and remember and think and reason. You know, it really is miraculous when you think about how much of the brain and the body go into it. And certainly, you know, scientists have also done experiments that look at how, you know, simple acts of building jigsaw puzzles as well. These are the kinds of things, you know, using your hands, your eyes, your memory, thinking about meaning, imagining, all of these things constantly being stimulated and not necessarily, you know, kind of outsourcing that function in any way, but really doing it yourself and putting in the effort. It really does keep our minds active and agile in ways that undoubtedly are beneficial for us as we age.
Yeah, man, we have aged. You know, if you haven't done this for a long time, what do you do to get back on track and say, you know what, I might be 40, 50, 60, maybe I'm in my late 30s, maybe I'm also in my 20s. It's just something that I don't do anymore. Where do we start to get back this great art?
I really think that you should, you know, do it, cultivate it the way that feels best for you. Find a time of day that works best for you. Are you the kind of reader who wants to read at nighttime, you know, when it's the last thing you do? Or do you want to do it first thing in the day? Do you want to do it, you know, in a particular spot in the garden? Really just think about what kinds of things you can do to make the reading itself pleasurable. And once the reading is pleasurable, I think then you can start to be in a space where you're comfortable enough to start reading out loud to yourself. And of course, always bring your children, bring other people along if it makes it comfortable. Sit in a room together, read to each other. There are so many different ways to cultivate our relationships with each other and our relationship to books as well.
We'll leave it there. Thank you so much, Lebohang. I think that's such an incredible conversation and maybe one that we can all implement today. I think actually, you know, this conversation also reminded me of so many childhood memories.
Yeah.
The first thing I'll do is go and find my favorite story from when I was a child and actually read that one out loud first.
Do you still have those books?
No, I don't have the book, but I mean, we have the internet and I can still read it there and find the book.
That's cool.
So we're going to try and do it. Hopefully so many others are also start engaging with reading out loud from this conversation. Thank you so much for your time, Lebohang.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
That's author, anthropologist and poet Lebohang Masango speaking about the benefits of reading out loud and why you should start today.